it's Thursday lunchtime, excuse me, which means your regular foray into my mind. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about endometriosis diagnoses and why we shouldn't be putting too much importance or placing too much importance on the diagnosis of endometriosis. Excuse me. And the reason I'm saying this is not because it's not important, so it's a bit of a clickbait title in my live this lunchtime. It's because it's the importance or the impact that that importance has on our mental health and on our journey towards combating or getting our life back from endometriosis, whether that be with conventional medicine or alternative complementary medicine. So why am I saying this? Well, all too often I see people who have struggled with symptoms, endometriosis type symptoms for years and years and years, haven't got anywhere with doctors. They finally get a laparoscopy and it comes back, the results come back and the doctors say, well, we can't find any endometriosis or there's no significant endometriosis. And that can feel horrible. I know somebody personally who that happened to. They'd had one laparoscopy, and then a few years later they were having flare-ups again. They had another laparoscopy and they said, well, you don't have endometriosis, you've never had endometriosis. So why isn't it important? Having said it is important, the diagnosis doesn't actually change what you're feeling. It doesn't change what you are experiencing. It doesn't change what you're feeling. What it does do is open the doors to speak to the right people and to have the, and I was going to say the right medication, the right treatments, but that's not necessarily the case either. What it does, it gives you a label, and that label can open doors to speak to the right people. It also gives you a sense of vindication. Excuse me. Excuse me. It can give you a sense of vindication, especially if you're one of these people who have gone through consultant after consultant, GP after GP, and nobody's kind of been listening to you. This is what happens. Excuse me. This is what happens when you work by yourself and don't have to speak to anybody all morning, apart from the vets. So yes, it opens doors and it can be a vindication. So if you're one of these people who've seen consultant after consultant, GP after GP, and nobody's really paid you any notice, your symptoms have been dismissed, then actually getting that label is a really good validation that you were right all the time. But actually you don't need that validation. Trust your body, trust yourself, know exactly what's going on, track your symptoms. There was a post earlier this week in the group about tracking pain, listening to your body's pain and writing it down. And what are the messages that your body's sending you? If you have that connection with your body, if you understand how your body's working, what your body's telling you through the pain, through the other symptoms, and you track it, you have a list of what's happening, then you don't need that label for vindication. We believe you. There are people out there, so many groups on Facebook, so many support groups, so many in-person groups when the time's right for those, where people struggle with exactly the same as you. So don't put too much importance on that diagnosis, because sometimes the doctors might come back and say they can't find it or there's not very much. And this is the thing with endometriosis as well. You can have endometriosis and not have too many symptoms. You can have a shed load of symptoms and have very slight endometriosis. So the fact that you've got endometriosis, the fact that you're grade 4, grade 1, that they didn't find any, that does not mean that what you're experiencing is nonetheless valid. All that diagnosis does is, once you get over that need for validation, all that diagnosis does is open the doors to people who can help you. Now, those people should already be helping you. It doesn't really matter if you have a diagnosis of endometriosis, because you are still having the symptoms. You might get passed around a bit more from pillar to post, but actually what you need in that instance is an advocate. You need somebody to help you, to stand up and say, no, you have got gynecological symptoms, you need gynecological support. You can get that from support groups like this, or you can get that from pals at the hospital. That's what they're there for. If you are in that situation where you've been waiting so long for the validation of the label of endometriosis and it doesn't come, or it comes in a different format to what you were expecting, do not let that demoralize you. Do not let that vindication disappear. You are right. You know your body better than anybody else. And just because you get the label that you weren't necessarily expecting, or you don't get a label at all, do not let that cloud your judgment as to what's going on with your body. Obviously, we all like labels. Labels, psychologically, from a psychological perspective, it gives us something to cling on to. It gives us a tribe. You can say to people, yes, I have endometriosis, it's diagnosed, blah, blah, blah. But actually, that really doesn't matter. If you, I can't speak for all groups, but if you come into this group and you don't necessarily have a diagnosis of endometriosis, but you're struggling with all the symptoms of endometriosis, or some of the symptoms with endometriosis, then nobody's going to think any less of you. You're not going to be any less welcome because you haven't got that label. In my world, we don't deal with labels anyway. If you come to see me, it doesn't really make a difference whether you're diagnosed with endometriosis or not, because we look at symptoms. We look at everything that's going on in your life, in your body, in your mind, in your soul. We look at everything. We look at all of that connection. And actually, just because you've got an endometriosis diagnosis doesn't really matter. So stop, if you are doing, stop stressing about the label of endometriosis. Don't worry about, like I say, whether it comes back as something different or even not there at all when you have a laparoscopy. If it does come back and says there's no, and they say there's no endometriosis there, then do get a second opinion and push for a second diagnostic laparoscopy if you can, or even an MRI scan. There are MRI scans as well now that are starting to be able to spot things as well. So have a chat with your consultant. Don't let them brush you off because endometriosis wasn't there. Have a chat to them. Let them know that you know it's really common that people who have endometriosis, sometimes it's missed in a laparoscopy, and could you please have another one? Because there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with asking for a second opinion. There's nothing wrong with asking for the support you need for the symptoms you have. So I hope that helps. If you are in that situation, you want to chat, drop me a message. I've turned on anonymous commenting as well on the posts in the group. So you can comment as well without everybody. Obviously, I'll know who's commented because I need to from an admin point of view. Or, well, Facebook deems that I need to from an admin point of view. But nobody else will see who's commenting. So if you do want to leave a comment, then anonymously, then please do so. If you want a bit of support, if you want a bit of help, if you just want a bit of a chat about where you are with your endo, then please do get in touch. Don't live by the label. All right, guys, have a lovely Thursday, have fantastic weekends, and I shall see you next week. Take care.